The area's foster parents have become angered over rumours that services available to their children will be cut. Mrs Chadwick this afternoon held a meeting at the Newcastle Family and Community Services building where she was met by a crowd of angry parents. The parents demanded answers from Mrs Chadwick and continued chanting outside throughout the minister's meeting with office staff and a delegation of parents. Mrs Chadwick says she cannot see any reason for the parents to be protesting.
It is very easy to make a sweeping statement like you are taking resources away from children. What I am trying to identify in each case is what resources have I allegedly taken away from a child. It is not my intention to take resources away from a child, and it's very easy for somebody to accuse me of that.
Jane Sutherland, speaking on behalf of the foster parents, says they are still not satisfied with today's assurances.
It was expected. We expected to go in there and be told what we were told, I think, but at least we've put our points across to the Minister. She knows in no uncertain terms about how we feel, and it was very much expected.
When NBN News aired this story about Peter Hodgson and his Burley in January, the Newcastle inventor had made little headway. After years of development and thousands of dollars, the Burley hadn't managed to crack it in his homeland, let alone overseas. But Peter stuck by his Burley, and now his persistence has paid dividends. He's been granted a US patent, clearing the way for an extensive export program. The success follows intensive testing by overseas parties, whose interest was roused by the unique nature of the Hodgson creation. Burleys aren't new, but Peter's Burley is different in that it not only just attracts the fish, it makes them want to feed through complex chemical compounds produced when the product reacts with water. The overseas party's satisfaction means Peter not only has his inlet into the lucrative US fishing market, reputed to be worth $15 billion a year, but also gives him a chance to take the Burley worldwide in the fish and prawn culture industries.
Members of the Wilderness Society waited outside City Hall this morning, hoping to catch Natural Resources Minister Ian Causley as he arrived to receive the Throsby Creek Total Catchment Management Study. But the tongue-in-cheek group, calling itself the Bare Earth Society, was too late. Mr Causley was already inside, and their calls for him to adopt the clear felling of forests, currently taking place in the southeast of the state, as a major development strategy went virtually unheard. Inside, Mr Causley was joined by politicians and others involved in developing the Throsby Creek strategy. Presenting the strategy report, Alderman Doyne Lanham said it could be used as a guide for future development in the catchment area. He now supports a description of Throsby Creek as a stinking oily pudding full of debris and refuse. The catchment study, undertaken by representatives of 10 government agencies, defines the creek's problems and ways to reduce pollution, flooding and erosion. The Minister says dredging is a priority to overcome sedimentation problems, and the federal government has been approached for assistance.
Well, I've asked for $1 million from the federal government. If they can come forward with that, we'll match them, and there'll be funds coming forward from the Hunter Valley Conservation Trust, who levy the ratepayers around here. That would certainly be a fairly good start.
The report recommends rehabilitation and dredging of the creek between Maitland Road and Hannell Street should be a priority, along with soil conservation works and a public awareness campaign. The report also looks at stormwater flooding, erosion, pollution, tidal inundation, foreshores and boating facilities. Throsby Basin has been identified as a possible site for a boat ramp, mooring and commercial facilities and waterfront open space. An urban river environment along the creek is recommended, providing a range of residential, commercial and recreational facilities.
How long will it be before Throsby Creek is restored?
Well, the federal budget's in August, so I suppose it's a few months down the track before we can get a start, but if we can get some funding, I would like to think that we could get the major part of those works done in 2 or 3 years anyway, which would at least give some depth back to the creek and get rid of the sedimentation.
While here, the Minister also announced up to $50,000 will be granted to develop a business plan for the Newcastle Showground. The plan will focus on the construction and operation of an exhibition and entertainment centre.
The Knights' woeful away record continued last weekend when they were soundly beaten by the Brisbane Broncos at Lang Park. And again it was silly indiscretions at the wrong time that cost the Knights dearly. Coach Alan McMahon has wielded the axe for the first time this season, and New Guinean imports Dori Covey and Arnold Krawanti have felt the full brunt of the changes by being relegated to reserve grade. Glenn Frende comes into the side, as does Tony Kemp, who will play in the centres. James Goulding, who has impressed everyone so far this season, seems certain to join Sam Stewart in the second row for his first full game in 1989. The Knights, who are a vastly different proposition at home, as was demonstrated against Western the Hotshots Manly, will meet the reformed, informed North Sydney Bears. Often accused of losing games from winning positions, Norths have turned the corner if last week's effort against previously undefeated Parramatta is any indication. The Bears wallop the Eels and will be tough opponents for the Knights on Sunday. Both clubs are equal fourth in the club championship and will be keen for a win in all three grades.
The studios have been temporarily set up in Nesca House in Newcastle, while the finishing touches are being completed at new premises in Derby Street. As a large crowd of invited guests gathered around the studio offices, waiting for the official announcement, tension was mounting as the time ticked away. And with only minutes to go before the deadline, the phone rang and the go-ahead was given. Managing Director Michael Webb was ecstatic at the news.
You know, it came through 7 minutes to 5 and we've waited 7 years. There's something appropriate about that. Talk about hold you to the last minute.
What's going to happen now for Newcastle?
Well, for a start, they've got a brand new radio station, the first one in decades, I believe. And we've been on air testing for the last 7 days or so. People have a taste of what we're about to do. We're an official broadcaster as of this moment, and you're looking at the happiest man alive, with the happiest lady too.
The station boasts the latest in production equipment, and the entire music library is made up of compact discs. The station's call sign will be NEW-FM and will broadcast on 105.3 megahertz.
McCormack is in the Royal Newcastle Hospital where his shattered left leg was operated on overnight. This morning he was in good enough spirits to describe just what happened.
Coming in, getting tackled by one of the North's players, and I seemed to tread in a footprint, and as I went one way the ankle went the other and just snapped it.
What's the extent of the injury?
It's broken in 2 places, just below the knee and right on the ankle itself, and dislocated as well.
This is dreadfully bad luck because you're playing super footy.
Yeah, I was happy with my form. It was real good, man. It's just one of those things, I suppose.
Promoter Bill Mordy, along with Jeff Harding, made the announcement of the fight at a press conference at Cardiff Workers Club today. Harding was to originally clash with super middleweight number 9 Dario Mattioni, but after he asked for more money, the bout was called off. Instead, Harding will now meet the World Boxing Council's light heavyweight world international champion Nestor Giovannini of Argentina in a non-title bout, and according to Jeff, he is predictable.
He's got 28 wins and 3 losses and 2 draws, and I think he's got 8 KOs. He's not a very notable puncher, but therefore everyone that's weighs over 12 stone can whack, let me assure you that. So therefore I think he's basically a technician more than anything. He's basically he'll run around, box as such, and be on the back move and be very very technical in his fight plan. But basically I'll get in there close and work off the left hand and basically let everything fall into place after that.
Harding has had 13 professional fights and has an unblemished record. He scored an excellent win in his last fight against Art Jimison, but he must keep winning to maintain his world ranking. And one thing in the hitman's favour is the Newcastle crowd.
The Newcastle crowd are really great. They get right behind me, and I'm really happy to be here. I'll be here a week before the fight, and to lap up all the people's admiration for Jeff Harding, and which that really makes me fight a lot better. And I like the people as such. They're really warm and generous to me, and they really look after me. And my trainer Johnny Lewis and Bill Morty assure me that once we come to Newcastle, it's all guns blazing.
The report by the Federal Government Task Force calls for nearly $300 million to be spent in Australian universities and colleges to guarantee the success of amalgamation. The Task Force recommends that more than $12 million of that be spent locally to assist in restructuring the Newcastle University and Hunter Institute. It also outlines what that money should be spent on. $5.5 million on a new administration building and a link road between the two campuses, $4 million on a new science building, $1 million on an early retirement scheme, and the rest of the funds on the establishment of a campus at Arimba and to cover the costs of a new administration system. Vice-Chancellor of the University, Professor Keith Morgan, said the recommendations were what the Joint Committee had asked for.
We had the opportunity to talk to the task force, and we put to them our needs, both for capital developments of the university and for the reorganisation costs accompanying amalgamation, and these are properly recommended by the task force.
Federal member for Newcastle, Alan Morris, says without funding, amalgamation would be impossible, and the only obstacle now preventing the success of integration is legislation covering an interim university council.
That interim council will be responsible for a very sensitive management change between two separate institutions, or three, into one. It's vital that the council have the absolute confidence and trust of the students, the staff, the general staff and the public at large, rather than being seen as political appointments. And I think today's fund's announcements in terms of recommendations show the Commonwealth putting its money where its mouth is, and I suggest that Dr Metherell put his legislation in the same place.
Dr Metherell was unavailable for comment today. However, all state education ministers are to respond to the recommendations before early next month. Jodie McKay for NBN News.
Rainstorms have failed to deter the Anzac spirit in Newcastle, where March organisers are reporting one of the best turnouts of veterans and spectators for many years.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
In the Lower Hunter, the Anzacs were also remembered. Although the marches and services were much smaller than in Newcastle, the spirit of Anzac Day was still very much alive. In Hunter Valley towns, both big and small, people gathered to reflect. In Curry, a small crowd watched the Anzac procession making its way towards the War Memorial. Joining the dwindling contingent of returned soldiers were representatives from the three armed services. Australia's defence future, marching proudly behind her past. Leading the march was the Cessnock Police Citizens Youth Band, joined by Guides and Brownies, Scouts and Cubs. In East Maitland, it was a similar scene, with a march along Newcastle Road to the War Memorial. It was a stirring spectacle, with soldiers standing guard at the cenotaph, watched by old diggers proudly wearing their campaign medals. Books and wreaths were laid by groups and individuals. The proceeds from a collection will go towards repairing the memorial. The message of the service was simple: the importance of peace and living in harmony with God and each other.
The Newcastle City Council approved the development of the city's new tax office more than 2 years ago. It's now built, and staff were due to begin moving in next month, but that may no longer be possible. Council last night chose not to approve Taverland's application to develop the old Shortland County Council depot in Queen Street into parking for 172 cars. Council said a more detailed traffic management study has to be provided before such approval is given, and the developers may have to help pay for traffic lights at the Queen and Derby Streets intersection. Until car parking facilities are available, Council stands by its condition that tax staff can't move in. The Lord Mayor says even if development was approved last night, it would be around August before the car park was ready, as the developer would need to get a building approval for the car park. The Lord Mayor can't understand why the developers have submitted their application so late.
If they thought we were going to just cave in because there was some pressure, well, they've now proven themselves to be markedly wrong. We gave them certain conditions of approval. Now, as far as the council was concerned last night, those conditions haven't been met, they haven't been varied in a satisfactory way, and as far as we're concerned, we're not going to allow the occupation of that building until those conditions are either met or satisfactory arrangements are made.
What about the building, the $15 to $20 million building? What happens to that in the meantime?
Well, it will be completed and it'll simply stand there, I imagine.
Stand there empty?
The fault is 100% with the developer.
Meanwhile, despite the possibility of delay in its relocation, the Tax Department says no delay can be expected with the processing of this year's tax returns. And although sources won't reveal when leases expire on the 3 buildings now used by the Tax Office in Newcastle, ministerial approval has been granted to extend those leases as long as necessary.